Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. Thought I'd break out the old sweatshirt here today. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, 1-800-CLEAN WATER. Doug Workman and his crew came in and took care of me with a water heater. I need it right about now as the weather has changed. I got to go back to sweatshirts. My pal Keith Miller over at Strategic Factory working up the new BP gear around here as we've merged WNST.net with Baltimore Positive, and it's all through all of our incredible sponsors, Dennis Colatzos and our friends at Coons Ford, of course, Blondell Miller Schuler, and the aforementioned Liberty Pure. At some point, the Blondell Miller guys are going to get me some swag here. Like, I have my investments from Leonard Raskin here, but a big appreciation for all of our sponsors as we move into bye week. Things slow down a little bit, but heat up. We have an election. We have the Steelers coming next week, and we have the residue of a Sunday afternoon that, quite frankly, Luke, I mean, even when it looked good, we were going to complain about it, right? And then the fact that the defense sort of allowed it to fall apart with the offense giving the Eagles the ball back and giving Carson Wentz a chance. There's going to be plenty to chew on here as the Steelers get ready to play a game instead of having a bye.
As I wrote 3 weeks ago, and you can check it out at baltimorepositive.com, the long, thankless journey to January began the moment the Ravens lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. And, we've talked about what that game represented as far as the potential of being a seminal moment, getting over the hump, a graduation kind of moment, a coming of age kind of moment, as we talked about the 2000 Ravens against Jacksonville or any number of big games over the years. And we know how that went. And the Ravens, from a perception standpoint, are dealing with the fallout of that, quite frankly. I mean, we said all along we expected the Ravens to win these 3 games following the Kansas City game, and they did that. Let's be very clear. There are lots of teams around this league that lose games they shouldn't lose. You see that all the time. So let's keep that in perspective. But when you are talking about a team that went 14-2 last year and then choked in the divisional round, let's call it what it was. Marlon Humphrey said it after the game that night. This is some of what you're going to deal with from a perception standpoint. And then, it's a reminder that it's very difficult to win in this league. And I think the Ravens spoiled everyone in these parts last year in making it look so easy. We know it's not, because we've seen this team, despite the success it's had for a quarter century here in Baltimore, it's not always easy. And in fact, it's quite difficult most of the time. So they're kind of chasing the ghost of last year and how they looked over 16 games last year, and understanding that January is what it is until they do something about it. The Kansas City Chiefs being 3-0 against them in the Lamar Jackson era is what it is until they have the chance to do something about it. So each of these performances that occur after that game, if you don't look perfect, if there's something that's not going as well, it just becomes magnified. And they're dealing with a little bit of that. And to be clear, that's not to say they don't have some issues here. I think that's obvious when you're talking about the fact that you had the lead that they had in the fourth quarter, 24-6, and you're a 2-point conversion away from either Lamar Jackson needing to drive you down the field in the last 2 minutes or going to overtime against a team that has 1 win all season. So no one's going to sit here and say that everything's perfectly fine, but at the same time, they are 5-1. And as I tweeted Sunday morning, and we talked about it a little bit in our previous segment, and we'll talk about this moving forward, they're the first 5-1 team since the 2012 Ravens, and they were the first one since the 2000 Ravens. And when the 2000 Ravens were 5-1, we knew what kind of adversity would ultimately lie ahead for them at that point. They were already into their 5-game touchdown-less streak. In 2012, this team was 9-2 until they got to late November into early December and lose 3 games in a row. Cam Cameron's gone, and they're getting blown out by the Broncos at home, and everyone's thinking, wow, is this team even going to make the playoffs, let alone thinking about Super Bowl? And we know what happened there. That's not to guarantee that it's going to repeat, and it's going to be the same thing this time around for this team, but it does offer some perspective that, 2019 was great in the sense that they were 2-2, and then they didn't lose again until January. But it doesn't go that way.
This
That's
team
not.
hasn't lost to a bad team since, let's say, Cleveland a year ago,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
they've only lost to really good teams when they've lost. And this game on Sunday would be probably, I don't want to say what the doctor ordered, to some degree, but when you win 45-6 every week, and we talk about, can you come back? Can you play in a 4-minute? Can you play in a 2-minute? What would it look like if they're down 10 minutes on the road against an inferior team because they kicked the ball around and jumped off sides and had down in distances like 1st and 35, as an example, right? That if that's
Right.
happening, then there's some things that they need to be awakened to, that this time last year it was just, we're just going to go in and beat everybody, and Lamar's going to run left and Lamar's going to run right, and it's going to be easy every week. This was a little bit of a wake-up call for them, that you better not take the foot off the gas, because in the National Football League, Carson Wentz was a number 1 overall, and he and the Zach Ertzes, when he's not banged up, and they can beat you too. And they run a 4-minute offense, and they can score 2 touchdowns with 4 minutes and 37 seconds left to go. And and you don't want to be down on your goal line playing for your life in overtime, dog-ass tired, trying to, have a busted play on the other side, save your ass, which is pretty much what happened on Sunday, right?
Yeah, look, it's great when you win by 4 touchdowns. It's great to have some of the performances they had last year, but we had even been saying it the last couple weeks. Yeah, they beat Washington by 2 touchdowns, but I remember vividly talking to you and doing post game after that, saying that this was probably a performance that wouldn't have beaten a Kansas City or maybe a Pittsburgh or maybe a Tennessee, or whichever team that you think is really good. Throw them out there. We talked about this even with the Cincinnati game. As much as the final score looked so convincing, we talked about how the defense was excellent in that game. But the offense, again, they put together a couple drives. You'll see it looked really good. They'll make a big play, but just not the same consistent way of moving the football like they had last season. So when you talk about it in those terms, it might be tough. And I'm talking from John Harbaugh and the coaching staff's perspective here. It might be tough to get players' attention when you're trying to make those corrections, but guys are thinking, Coach, we beat the Bengals by 24 points. Coach, we
were up
beat Washington.
21-3 at halftime, man.
We
Come
beat
on.
Washington by 2 touchdowns and they scored 1 late. It really wasn't all that close. And I would agree with that sentiment, but if you want to get better, if you want to have the resolve to make the corrections that you need to make, and it's clear they need to. When you commit 12 penalties, and the number of illegal formation penalties they had on Sunday, those are inexcusable types of penalties there. When you're not lining up properly
In a quiet stadium.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's absolutely a problem.
Can you imagine what that stadium would have been like with them coming back? Like what the sounds would have been like in there with the
how it would have
Eagles coming
sounded
back.
Or how it would have sounded in the first half when they were going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out.
There's
You're
no
right.
doubt about it, but
You're right.
It was not lost on me at all during the course of the day, especially when I hear the Fly Eagles Fly song and all of that, as to what all that is. And look, it's bye week, and we're gonna talk about all of this and position by position. But play along with me here, because let's say there are fans in the stands, and let's say that they do make it on that, and the Ravens lose by 3 points. Man, this would really be, had they lost the game, that would be the lesson, right? The lesson would be, oh my God, what the hell happened? And there were moments there in the last 2 minutes as I was starting to unplug the computer and starting to pack up and saying, all right, you know what, you get a cheesesteak, get the pretzels, let's get out of here. Luke and I'll get some radio done. It's bye week. We're good. They're on the goal line here, and if the field goal goes the wrong way in overtime or whatever, oh my God, it would be a putrid loss, unlike, quite frankly, any that we've experienced around here in the Lamar era, or for some of these young guys. They've not been a part of one of those. You and I have been fans a long time. We've seen Carson Palmer and Andy Dalton break our hearts. We've seen Lee Evans and Bill. We can go through the whole list of the heartbreaks. We've had all of that. We've been the comeback team. We've been come back upon. But for this generation, that really would have been a life lesson had that happened on Sunday. And it, came closer to happening than we probably want to even admit or talk about here the next 10 days, right?
No question about it. And let's face it, bringing this back to the Kansas City discussion, the January discussion, we've talked a little bit about the fact that when things are going well for this team, boy, it's going really well, right? But we've talked about the times when they do fall behind. How do they respond to that? As much as the focus falls on Lamar Jackson, and understandably so, when he's your franchise quarterback, when he won the MVP last year, when he does all the special things we see him do. I mean, had an amazing touchdown run on Sunday. Now, the first touchdown pass to Nick Boyle, I mean, he created that. I mean, you see that, even if it's not as consistent as it was last year. But my
and
point
by
is,
the way, they needed each one of those, right? Like in the end,
no doubt.
In the end, that miracle touchdown run he made was like the difference, literally the difference.
Sure, no question. But when you go through some adversity like they did on Sunday, and to your point, this could have easily gone the other way. I mean, think about it. They miss a field goal at the end of the half. Think about John Hightower. As much as we talked about the defense and how it lights out it played in the first half, there were a couple plays for Philadelphia to make that game's totally different in the second half.
The Eagles stunk in the first half, right?
And to be clear, just because a single play does or does not happen in the first quarter on the first drive, and what we're talking about there, Miles Sanders dropped one where he kind of got turned around, but still a play that he should make, and he'd be the first to tell you that as kind of that dual threat running back that can catch passes out of the backfield. But there's always the butterfly effect that, okay, if this happens, is the rest of the game going to play out in the same exact way? Probably not.
There were a lot of those issues on Sunday. There were a lot of mistakes made on Sunday.
Sure, and you could even talk about on the Ravens side, there were some plays that the difference could have been that they're up by another touchdown, or they dropped a couple interceptions. A couple times where they could have had a takeaway. They forced fumbles that in one or two cases rolled out of bounds. So you always look at those types of plays, but bringing it back to the big picture, what it means. Coaches getting the attention of the players for the bye week. And I'm not saying they wouldn't have had it before, but when you have a game where you have a near meltdown, and that's what this was. This was a near meltdown. When you're up 24-6 going into the fourth quarter, and you're in a position where you have to stop a 2-point conversion to not choke the lead away.
That is a what the hell happened if you went to the bathroom and came back, or went to water the plants, right? Like, and I'm sure there were some people who, and I'm sure there are people gambled on it around the country or whatever that looked up and said, the hell's going on in Philadelphia right now if you weren't watching Red Zone or whatever, right?
No question about it. I mean, I saw a couple of my friends on social media said, whether they had to work or they had to go run some errands, do something with the family.
And it happened late, right? Late on a day when there were 9 games, right? So it happened at 4 o'clock. So a lot of the country was watching the meltdown.
Yeah, no question. I mean, this was a 24-6 game, and Kroom catches the 3-yard touchdown pass with 13 and a half minutes to go. And even at that point, it's 24-14, and you're thinking, okay, the Ravens are going to put together a drive. And we've seen this go back 2 years ago. They'd have these 8-minute drives in the fourth quarter, and they didn't do that. Now, to their credit, they did kick a couple field goals in the fourth quarter, which thank goodness they did for their sake, because they needed those.
Tucker wanted that 57-yarder when they punted before the half.
And he wants to kick from 70. I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that. But, yeah, I mean, that's –
well, he ran out on the field like, me?
Yeah.
You got to punt? What? There was a little bit of that going on. And at the time, it feels like – you're up 14-0. You don't need any more points. Everything's or 17-0 at the time.
Defense is lights out.
Yeah, like this punt. Maybe we'll get the ball back. Humphrey will strip the ball or something, and maybe we'll get 7 more out of this or 3 more out of this. And it's not often that you see Harbaugh play conservatively like that. Usually, it's like bring it on, kick the field goal. We got the best kicker on the planet. Let's go. And it felt a little bit to me like you don't see John take the foot off the gas much in this era. And or the book, the Vegas book that they have there, the Eric DaCosta Astros handbook of, how to manage the blackjack table. Because I always know they're doing it that way. This is not, John Madden saying, well, the gut instinct. There's no gut instinct. It's the book says punt, so they punted. And at the end, the needing of points for them that we added it all up at the end and had enough, but that wasn't the thought at any point in the game, quite frankly. It was more of a field position. Let's let the defense go out there and run around and crush this quarterback who really, really looked overwhelmed in a way that you don't usually see a National Football League quarterback not named Lossman looking, you know?
Sure. I mean, and part of it, I mean, that offensive line was just, it was bad. I mean, I tweeted at one point, I already mentioned it to you, that at one point I thought, the Bengals would think these guys are struggling up front. I mean, that's how bad it was. And Carson Wentz was, running for his life. And in some cases, not even having a chance to run for his life because he was just swallowed up in the pocket. But you do look at every drive. I mean, I think back to the 3rd and 9 on the opening drive of the third quarter where Lamar Jackson takes a sack. I mean, where you were talking about it, where potentially you have a 58-yard field goal then and they decide to punt, which, it's those things, the penalties, those are the things that concern you. I mean, that's a play that, and Lamar Jackson is still young, but we saw Joe Flacco take plays like that on occasion, and you can't excuse it. I mean, that's points. Those are points that are just erased from the scoreboard when you're talking
Pernell
about
McPhee dropped 3 points. I tweeted that at one point. Like, literally, the ball's in his hands. They're on the 20-yard line, right? Dropped 3 points. That was on the ensuing possession, right?
Yeah. You're right. I think so. When you're talking about an edge rusher and a guy like Pernell McPhee, I'm not expecting him to catch the ball. But when a defensive back doesn't catch it, yeah, right. But I mean, we've talked about that though. I mean, there were a lot of plays in this game, whether it was Philadelphia making it a closer game or the Ravens having a chance to not turn it. I mean, I guess turn it into a blowout because they led by 3 scores at one point.
It was a blowout.
Yeah. I mean, right. It felt that way for large stretches of the game, regardless of how the offense might have looked choppy. I mean, the defense was just so overwhelming. But I mean, it's the little things. I mean, you've got to do those things well. And when you get into that late in the third quarter, into the fourth quarter, John Harbaugh loves to talk about winning football, and they didn't play winning football, and it very nearly cost them. So going into the bye week, you're trying to figure those things out. You're trying to figure out this offensive line, getting it playing at a higher level. And people will focus on, and I've even talked about it, yeah, they miss Marshall Yanda. And yeah, they'd like to have Tyree Phillips or Patrick McCurry or whomever's lining up at right guard playing better. But at the same time, Ronnie Stanley got flagged 4 times on Sunday. Now, a couple of them were declined, but a guy that people want to pay $22 million per year to, and which is probably what it's going to, that's what he's going to command or at least ask for, given what Laramie Tunsil signed for. Him committing 4 penalties in a game is unacceptable. This team having multiple scenarios where they line up illegally is unacceptable. I mean, you're going to have a hold or two, but I don't expect an offensive line to play perfectly, but they had 8 different flags over the course of Sunday's game. When you're already struggling to run the ball as consistently as you'd like to, when you're having your moments where you're not protecting your franchise quarterback as consistently as you'd like to, you can't make mistakes on top of it where it's self-inflicted like that. And
alignment, assignment, technique, right?
Yeah. So
that's a baseline. You mentioned things about the game that were a little disturbing for me that we could talk about for the next week or two. Boy, Marcus Peters and him being such an incredible talent and getting himself jettisoned in and out of various places. And I remember distinctly last year, you were not on the trip, I believe, to Cleveland, because I remember being in the Cleveland press box at one point and hearing how impressed Ozzie Newsome was with Marcus Peters, right? And thinking to myself, and they paid him and they love him and whatever. We watched him jaw at the referees, jaw at everyone. He never shut up. He never stopped. He was talking while he got burned on the drive that would have been the game-tying drive at the sticks. I don't want to call it Detroit meltdown, Bart Scott, that era of
that would be too strong, right?
But it was along the line. If you had 5 guys like him behaving like that, you would have had the Detroit game, because as an isolated unacceptable jawing at the referees over and over. And it was so obvious. And in an empty stadium, you don't have much else to focus on other than the guy being all animated up in every – and I don't – maybe you don't see it on TV, dude, but maybe that's the one thing of me being there and the TV camera being your eyes or my eyes for anybody that's not there is that I would think that they can't be real happy with how Marcus Peters composed himself. I wasn't happy as a fan, as a journalist, dude, the game's in the balance. Play. You're a veteran, play. And there was way too much extracurricular for me. And the PI notwithstanding, which it sounds like we were on different sides of where that was, as we talked about in the previous segment. But no matter what, I would think that they don't want that. When things are going bad, when the field gets tilted the other way, I think they need a better version of Marcus Peters than what they got on Sunday. And
that's fair. And some of what you're mentioning maybe did show up a little more as from your vantage point than it would on television. I definitely disagreed with the PI call, but what you're referring to covers more than that. And just the defense in general. You played so well for the better part of 3 quarters, and I know they gave up a score in the third quarter. You can't expect them to pitch a shutout every week or anything like that, but to have some of the communication breakdowns that they had in the fourth quarter, and Jalen Hurts coming out there and they're having some troubles with him. They let Carson Wentz run around. Those are the types of things you can't have happen. And they had a big lead, and I can understand giving up a touchdown drive late when you have a 2 or 3 score game, and it's tough to keep your foot on the gas. But Deshaun Elliott talked about it after the game. They've got to learn how to, that's a great example, a great teachable moment for stepping on an opponent's neck. When you have them, when you have them in position where, you can talk about it in terms of the game's in control. You can talk about whatever the win probability was at that point, whatever, whatever term you want to put it in. They had that game, and they didn't put it away. And when you're talking about a young team, even though, as you just mentioned, Marcus Peters is a veteran on the team, you want to see how guys handle themselves and compose themselves. And that's been a big part of this narrative for January and playing Kansas City, is when things aren't going well. As much as the focus has been on Lamar Jackson, there have been lots of other mistakes made across the board. Remember, Lamar Jackson wasn't the one who dropped all the passes against Tennessee, or Lamar Jackson wasn't the one that let Derrick Henry run all over them. So, you look at those types of situations and you want to see how guys respond mentally. Now, to their credit, Matt Judon and LJ Fort make up just a monstrous play on the 2-point conversion. Although I saw Brian Baldinger breaking it down on Twitter, and he was kind of saying, how did the Eagles not even call that play and run that play when they saw how the Ravens were aligned? But that's a different story. But they at least were able to rise to the occasion to finish the game at that point. You don't want it to come to that, but when it does, you want to make the play, and they were able to do that. But there's plenty to unpack, plenty for this team to work on. Most of the focus will be on the offense, and I get that, and I would agree with that. But even the defense, a great lesson there that you need to play 60 minutes, and because this is the NFL, and even though the Eagles are a completely injury-ravaged outfit, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where they're down to 2 original starters at the end of the game with Carson Wentz and Jason Kelsey, with Ertz and a couple others not being out there on the field. But you've got to finish, and you've got to have that resolve to, when things start going sideways a little bit, to not lose your composure and to regroup and get some stops. And they gave up big plays. You can't do that, or suddenly a 24-6 game is a 1-score game very late.
Bye weeks and pandemics lead to one thing. My wife said last week, can we get the tequila in cases? And I said, yeah, I think they can do that over King Discount Liquor. So I'm going to give the King a ring. Paul King has been one of our great supporters here. Lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. It is bye week here and we are merging. I'm wearing the old school WNST. I love the old WNST sweats. You know, these were nice, but we're going to have nice Baltimore Positive gear around here soon, courtesy of our friends at Strategic Factory. We're merging the streams. If you go to WNST.net soon, you're going to see Baltimore Positive all in one place. Luke's got a whole sports section. There's business, there's news, there's politics, there's leadership, there's arts. JY from Styx is checking in this week. Jeff Pearlman's checking in on his new book on the NBA as well, and the World Series is going on. What else we got? Bye week. Oh, let's see. Pandemic. Right, the election. The election's coming up as well. We'll be talking more and more about all of these things at Baltimore Positive. All of it brought to you by our friends Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. I've got the world-famous chicken. I had the Chicken Palooza shirt out. My wife picked up the 10-piece last week for the game. No game this week. I was eating chicken all week last week. It was delicious. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. $5 chicken sandwiches. Don't forget that as well as the Rofo coffee in my Cole Roofing mug. State Fair is still open. They're still socially distanced. They still have the chicken and waffles. But across the street now, El Guapo is here. Quesadillas. I got some salsa in the kitchen, the refrigerator from Evan over there. El Guapo, chips, salsa, margaritas. I talked about tequila earlier. I don't know, man. Something about plagues and tequila go together. I mean, I'm just saying. Get on over to El Guapo. I'll break out the green shirt now that we busted up the Eagles on Sunday. Things are all good there. I also gave my secondary magma lamp. The old magma lamp had a black base and purple magma. This is the purple base with the black magma. I gave my other one to Chris Pica. It's going to be part of his man cave now in South Baltimore. You can get this by going to sporticulture.com. You'll see their ads a click away right next to the Taharka ads and the Raskin Global ads and the Blondell Miller Schuler ad. Listen, sponsors have been great to us. They keep Luke and I going. Many of you know this over many, many years, 30 years in. I'm going to be writing a welcome ad at Baltimore Positive for all the changes going on, all the things we're doing here, and why we are doing it. You can still find Luke anywhere the Ravens are. I was going to say in Owings Mills, but you might not find the Ravens at Owings Mills much this week. Whatever they're doing, we'll get to you first on the WNST Tech Service, all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday back in the cockpit from 3 until 5. The Sunday Sports Voice heard on Sunday mornings, but live from 3 until 5, and Luke and I participate each and every week with that as well. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, now trading as BaltimorePositive.com.